Welcome to Life by Design, episode 391. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today, by my co-host, Dr. Mike Gibson. We are creators of Life by Design with many locations worldwide. Each week on the show, we discuss the principles and the practice of Life by Design. Today's episode, we're talking about surviving versus thriving, but very specifically, a really interesting study that I think brings up a concept we want to talk about. But before we do, the elephant in the room is we have Dr. Mike Gibson on the episode. How are you, Mike?
I'm well. I was thinking this morning when I was preparing for this that I can't remember the last time I got this invite.
I can't remember.
I'm honored and offended all at once.
Yeah, for a lot of listeners, they may never have heard you on here. So for those people who are newer, and when I say newer, I mean literally like the last 4 years to the Life by Design podcast, this is Dr. Mike Gibson. He is one of the directors of Life by Design. Mike has a thriving practice in multiple businesses in Canada, Ottawa area, and he's a good friend of mine, one of our best friends here at Life by Design. And he's been my business partner for literally the last, it's hard to say, but probably 10 years now, Mike. Actually, what did we say it was the other day? I think we said it was 2009. So yeah, 11 years, if you will. Wow. I know it's time flies. It's crazy. It does remind me, doing the old episodes in the recording studio. And I think you were in there for at least one or two episodes back in the day during our live events we would host. And so, yeah, a lot of fun to have you on the show today. And maybe we'll be able to make this happen, at least once a year. And just that way, all new listeners will know who the heck you are. So today we're talking about a concept that is very, very core to Life by Design. And in doing the research and just seeing what's out there with the concepts we want to cover, this article or research study popped up. So let me just break it down, and Mike will be color commentary today, and he'll add his thoughts in as we go. He not only runs his own corrective chiropractic facility, but also has a CrossFit facility. Actually, shouldn't say that. Mike has a training facility in Ottawa, previously CrossFit, and a pile of other businesses along the way. So he'll be able to add his thoughts here on this. And we're talking about something called the Triage Theory. And I found this really, really interesting because it's some of the first research that I've seen that really talks almost exactly about what it is we've been saying for the last, decade, which is there's a difference between surviving and thriving. So let me just give a little context, and then Mike, you can share your initial thoughts. This idea of a triage theory is simply that, when many people think about nutrition, they think of topping up, right? Or they think of having a specific disease process, and this is good for that. What we call this for that. I have multiple sclerosis, so I need to megadose vitamin D, or I have cancer, I need to megadose vitamin C. And we're not even getting into those topics today. We're simply saying, and I've always said, there's requirements for your body. And some of those requirements are nutritional. Of course, there's movement requirements, thought requirements, brain and nervous system requirements. But when the nutritional requirements are impaired, that there's going to be other effects that are immeasurable. And that's essentially what this article and this theory is talking about, that when you're deficient in certain nutrients, your body will triage those nutrients in order to survive. And part of that survival mechanism is it actually and without getting into the details, it affects the longevity of the organism, or what they call the longevity protein. So just as a general thought, Mike, what are your initial thoughts of that? I know it pretty much supports what we've been saying, but any initial thoughts around that article?
Well, I think, the first thing is always really pleased to see whenever new research comes out that really supports the whole idea of requirements and strategies that we've been talking about for over a decade now. I think it's correct. I think it's always been correct. And so love to read new research like this that really supports it. So, just love seeing that. And I think the idea is one that's really important, and maybe more important than ever before. As we look obviously right now, as we're recording this in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, people are more stressed than ever. And so if, I've always seen in practice for 12, 13 years, we've been measuring HRV, heart rate variability, which is an interesting measurement, letting us know where people's nervous system are. Are they in that fight or flight sympathetic state? Or are they in the parasympathetic state? And, doing this thousands and thousands and thousands of times with different patients, before the whole pandemic, and people were stressed. It was not uncommon to see people, most people really struggling in regards to the metrics that were given from the HRV. And so now add the coronavirus and all the additional stress on top of that, and then add information like this, letting us know that when, there are requirements that are not being met specifically from a nutritional standpoint, that it's going to send us further into the sympathetic fight or flight state. Wow, this is a big problem.
Well, what I love about this too is it highlights one of the core principles, and that's the idea that the body is amazing. And they don't necessarily come right out and say it, but they're talking about this idea of adaptation. And I think if you look at our practices and you look at Life by Design and people listen to the podcast and follow along, I think that maybe is the most important principle for people to recognize, that the people who get that are more compliant, get better results than really even understanding maybe some of the specific details of, nutrition or exercise and so on. If you understand that your body's amazing, I think your natural inclination is to try and do things to support it. And if you recognize that many of the changes in your body is a sign of adaptation. So for example, nobody wants to be under stress and have your body pooling nutrients to help you sustain life. But I take a step back and look at that and I'm like, wow, that is wild that your body, this amazing organism, can say, look, you're in a state of fight or flight. And it's really interesting that we measure that in our practices. You're in a state of fight or flight, and your body is now pooling resources to survive, and it's giving up the long-term benefits. So it's saying, look, you're probably not going to live as long, but we're going to keep you alive right now. A lot of people will get scared by those things and they get freaked out. I actually look at that and I think that's just a reinforcement of, a lot of things we've been saying for a long time.
Yeah, especially if I could add, not just that we're adapting, but that it's intelligent adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really important piece of it, because so many times, not all the time, but so many times, a lot of the symptoms and dysfunction that we see, in traditional ways, is described as something that's very negative, when in fact it's the perfect intelligent response by the body to a situation where, like in the case that we're talking about now, where there's requirements that are absent. So it's brilliant, it's intelligent, it's the perfect response given the environment that the body's been put into.
And what's beautiful about that, and we've seen it both in our clients and people we've consulted with, it's that knowledge and understanding that leads to trust, right? And trusting the body. And I know for us, Mike has 2 kids, 2 boys, and we have 2 girls. And, the way we deal with our children is a perfect example of this. How many times have your kids been quote unquote sick or had symptoms that the majority, and this is not a judgment if you're listening, by the way, the majority of times it would take you to the hospital, right? Or having you use medication. Whereas it's not that we are necessarily privy to any different information. It's that over time, we've seen the body adapt so many times in so many different ways that there's a level of trust. And I know for me, and not just in our family and yours, but the parents in our practice, the ones who have developed that, those are the ones who are able to not intervene and actually reinforce that, trusting the body does have amazing outcomes. And then to that, add the whole idea of requirements and strategies in those situations. The first step is to look at the requirements that are not being fulfilled. And the question becomes, what can I do right now? What are the best strategies that I can act on to fulfill the requirements? Because when we know what those are, then that's going to give the body the best opportunity to heal from whatever it is that they're overcome or adapt in the best way possible to whatever it is that they're struggling with. Yeah, I couldn't say that any better. I mean, that really is the crux of everything that we've been talking about for the last 12 years. And, I know in your practice and mine, a lot of times when people come to me with a complaint, if you will, my first step is, okay, well, let's go ahead and audit your lifestyle. You've been coming here, so we know that's not the problem. And how is your eating by design going? Oh, how's your movement? All of a sudden, all these other areas come up. And, if you're listening in, you have to recognize that these requirements, they are not, they are mandatory, right? They are not like, well, maybe I should do that, or maybe that's a requirement. I mean, your choice to follow the strategy is up to you, but you are not absolved of the requirement because you don't want to actually do it. I don't really want to exercise. That's fine, but you're still required to move. Well, it's like saying, I don't want to sleep. that's fine. You don't have to if you don't want to, but there's a consequence that you can't absolve yourself from just because, you want to avoid the reality of the actual requirement.
And what I hope for people listening is that, I hope you're saying, well, that sounds really simple. You mean health, that's all I need to do is fulfill the requirements. Yes, that's what we're saying. But I also hope I had an interesting conversation with a patient last night actually, and we were talking about the NBA players, and they're all going to be wearing those little rings that are going to be, when they go back to play again, they're going to be wearing those rings to monitor their symptoms so that the doctors can be alerted to when they're starting to develop COVID symptoms, right? So that they can quarantine them, et cetera, and they can act appropriately. And so got us into a conversation. I said, well, Apple Watches can probably do all the same things. We don't need these fancy, very expensive rings. And then kind of the conversation evolved, and it got to the point, it's like, and I started realizing, there's also this cool technology that's evolving, and I love it. I think it's so great, and for so many reasons. But at the end of the day, the funny thing is does it really change a lot for most people, right? Sure, maybe a professional athlete, you want to tweak that 1%, totally get it. But for most of us, right, it just comes back to, hey, let's just, get back to fulfilling the basic requirements, And
I think that's the problem, Mike, is it does change a lot for the average person, but it shouldn't.
Exactly.
Right? You are 100% right. It shouldn't change anything, whether I'm struggling with, a condition or disease. It shouldn't change the fact that my action steps are, I need to move, I need to have a fitness program, I need to eat by design, I need to get my spine and nervous system examined, I need sleep, I need, all these other psychological requirements, whether I feel good or bad. And that, we just kind of hit on a bigger topic and the crux of probably why healthcare is where it's at. I had this big conversation in our, right now we're growing a really great Facebook community for where we're at. And we have an ad that runs on Facebook, and it's me talking about, making Chatham-Kent great, basically, and joining the drive to make it the healthiest community in Canada. And the amount of negativity it's mind-blowing. Right? My ad is literally about, let's get together and let's create a resource where I can help you. And I have about 70 comments on this Facebook post already. And I would say 50 of them are, we need more doctors. We can't do it. Chatham-Kent sucks. There's a drug, all the stuff. And it's like, it doesn't change the fact that irregardless of that, you still only have one choice. Well, you have two, but one it's going to be helpful. And that's just start doing all the stuff that you need to do.
Yeah. And, as far as those things, the good news is a lot of those things are again, I don't want to minimize it, but I was going to say, I'll just say it. They're not terribly difficult. They're pretty easy.
They are.
Sleep better, get out and move. It doesn't mean that you have to, become a marathon runner or a CrossFit athlete. Just get out and walk, do some mobility, right? Get out in fresh air, get on your bike, eating good, real food. Right? These things aren't terribly challenging, but they're just, it's about consistency. It's about doing the right things over a period of time. And that's going to lead to some great results and help you fulfill the requirements. But just doing that is all most people need, regardless of what all this fancy technology tells us.
100%. And I think that was really the point for today, guys, is yes, talking about interesting research and the triage theory and pooling nutrients. But all we're saying is that your body has requirements. It's amazing. Meet the requirements and do that over and over again, rinse and repeat. So I'll put the Eat by Design book. You can go download that there if you want to learn about eating real food, or take the 30-day challenge. It's free. We'll put that at lifebydesign.com/podcast. Find today's episode. And as always, thank you for listening in and joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.